All right, let's go ahead and get started. All right, good morning, folks. My name is David Wethington, PA-HMIS Administrator here at DCED. Um, Also with me is Brian Miller, who is our HMIS consultant, um, who many of you both know both of us very well. But today we're going to cover um, the housing inventory usage of HMIS. Many folks might already be using housing inventory for their beds or their vouchers, but we felt it was best that folks understood what the housing inventory is and how it can be used in the system, as well as it is a actual federal requirement that everybody who has some type of facility-based program within HMIS that reports on the housing inventory count has their bed inventory or facility inventory in HMIS accordingly. So the good news is we've already set up the housing inventory, each and every program's housing inventory in HMIS. The not so good news is it might be in there, but what we're doing is we're basing the housing inventory off of the most recent HIC or housing inventory count, which was the end of February. So if the beds might have changed or funding kind of adjusted or shifted where you increased your beds or decreased your beds since then, there is a couple of extra steps that you need to do, and we'll go over that towards the tail end of the presentation. But again, we really don't expect this to be as long as we thought it would, but we always want to build in time for questions and answers and so on and so forth. So just a couple things to point out before we actually dig into the actual live demonstration. Again, I'm always going to reference the PennsylvaniaCSC.org/PAHMIS website. This section, this training alone has its own separate section on the website. If you scroll down under PAHMIS reference guides, you have the housing inventory guides, which should be the most recent ones, and we'll probably we'll update them as time goes along. When some changes might be made, or if it looks a little bit different, we'll make sure that it gets up to date. So it'll be under this section for the housing inventory guides, and then the recording will be under trainings and recordings. And as I'm thinking, I'm probably going to organize this by date, just so that folks are aware of which was the most recent training there. But it'll get added in this section as well, as soon as possible after the webinar today. All right, so diving right in to the system, I'm going to be in the production site using my HMIS service agency. I've already logged in, and as you see, I'm on the home workspace right now, because what I want to do first is walk you through the process. So many of you probably already are aware of, or may not be aware of, but as you're enrolling a client towards the end of the assessments, when you've completed those assessments, the system always asks you within the workflow, do you want to enroll this client into your facility? Some people might say yes, some people might say no, but moving from there, you would say yes. So what I did was, instead of walking through the entire enrollment process and going through the assessment, because you guys could view that in another training, I've actually gone to that point and paused the workflow. And there is the ability, so let's say, you're working on an enrollment and you are, something comes up or a client comes into the room, you do have the ability to pause any workflow that you have, and then log out, and then the next time you log back in, if you go to your home workspace, you can go to your user pause workflows and resume that workflow from where you're at. And hopefully it doesn't act all slow today. There we go. So I was moving a little slow today. But as you see, here's that whole workflow that you're in, where I've gone through, edit, so I was viewing the household, the program enrollment, and then the assessments and so on and so forth. So all I've done was actually enrolled this individual as a single individual for now, and now I'm at the point after completing all the assessments, it's asking me perform check-in. So yes, you can perform the check the client into the facility, or no, complete the enrollment. A lot of folks might do that, but what housing inventory can do in terms of checking folks into the facility is you can actually, by setting up your facility the correct way, you can actually attach a dollar amount per bed or per unit or per voucher, and then do further reporting from that, from a service transaction report, to see what your numbers look like per month, per quarter, at the end of the year, see how much money it actually costs to house those individuals within the facility. So for this purpose, I'm going to go ahead and select yes, check the client in. And I'm actually using my permanent housing facility. So as you see over here, you can view your housing facility right off the bat to see what the units look like and what's available. But if you already have one in mind, you can do that. But we'll go into that once we get into where that's located. But again, it's going to show your facility. It's going to show your check-in date. And then the room is going to be the unit or a room within the facility. I'm just going to use unit 1 for now. And the bed, you'll select the bed that the person is going into. Now, chores and storage, not really worried about that. But here, you can actually put in a cost per night. Let's just say cost per night, it's $20, $25. Don't quote me on that. I'm not saying that that's the number you should be using. But that's what I'm saying for this purpose. As you see, it carries over the client, their date of birth, their gender, and then for some reason, if you ever, whenever you're doing enrollment, service enrollments, if you don't get anything here, 9 times out of 10, it's because you're trying to add the service before the actual enrollment. But if you're going through this workflow, it'll automatically attach the enrollment. I'm going to select share the transaction, and I'm going to check the client in. And then I'm going to exit and finish the workflow. By clicking finish the workflow, it completes everything, and now the client is checked in. To verify that, you can go over here to your workspace. Again, this is where you can locate your workspaces, and whatever one's showing is going to be your active one. It looks like it shows the entire words there, and as a shorter version. So I'm going to come over here to the 4th box, to where it says housing. Select it, and then as you see, it's always going to bring you to the facility dashboard. You always want to verify for what facility that you're in. Similar to for coordinated entry, when you're in the provider workspace and you're trying to figure out, what if you're working with multiple agencies, why your agency is not up top there. So to make sure you're under the correct one, you click View Housing Facilities, and what you're going to do is you're going to select the facility that you want to work within. As you see, it'll show all your facilities within your makeup of your organization, and it'll also show you the beds and the availability and so on and so forth. So I'm going to go ahead and select that permanent housing facility, and what it's going to do is it's going to show me all of my units and then the availabilities there. Just to also point out, I'm going to work primarily in the case manager work group, but I'll switch over to the agency manager work group when we go to talk about updating or moving beds around and so on and so forth. All right, so, and as being in the case manager work group, you'll see that the only options we have is housing management and housing reports. But essentially what you want to do is, the first things first, is you want to look at your units to make sure it's set up correctly. So if we go to the housing management, essentially we can go to the facility inventory, which is what you're seeing, and it's going to show 3 of 4, and there's 3 different units. First unit has 4 beds, second unit has 4 beds, third unit has 3 beds. If for some reason you're what we want everybody to do, and I'll make sure to send out an email to everybody, email reminder, but what we'd like everybody to do is on a yearly basis during that housing inventory point in time frame, we want to go in and confirm your facilities bed inventory. And in order to do that, you'd want to come to your facility inventory. You want to look over the individual inventories. You can take a deeper look into those by going to room and bed overview, where it'll show you the room, the available beds, and the beds occupied. So as you see, it shows me 3 rooms, 10 beds, and only 1 is occupied. And then there's a description. The other important area, and we'll get into this later, is the housing type. You want to make sure that the housing type is confirmed as correct. So that's either, obviously, households with at least 1 adult and 1 child, or it could be households without children, or it could be a child-only household. So you want to make sure whatever is in your grant funding and how it's set up according to funding, or how it's set up according to your program, you want to make sure it's set up correctly, as well as some of these other metrics as well. Like the permanent supportive housing projects would be designated chronically homeless persons, and then it might be veteran specific or youth specific. All right. When it comes to this available begin end date, it's best that if your program is open year round, you want to make sure that there's no dates in there, as it's an open-ended program and it doesn't end. When you're looking at programs such as cold weather shelters or specific programs that are have time frames between them, that's when that would come into play. But open-ended programs have no date in there. All right, so after you've gone in and you've verified your facility, what you want to do is come back up here to housing profile. Now, under this housing profile, you'll do a couple things. As you see, annual review needed. If you get this alert, that means you need to go in and you need to confirm your inventory. So in order to confirm your inventory, 1, you look at your room and bed overview, and then 2, you come here to your profile to make sure the information in there is correct. Now, you can either, as you saw before, when I was enrolling Mr. Menzel into the program, it asked me what his cost per bed night was. You can attach the cost per bed night to the client, or if it's more of a shelter, you could put it as a facility cost that'll be put in there. So for permanent supportive housing or any rapid rehousing projects, anything dealing with units, I would say in fluctuation in a lease that dictates how much that is, I would attach that to the client rather than doing an overall facility cost per night. Now, if it's a shelter or transitional, then you can go ahead and put it in there, and then it'll adjust itself from there. But after you've gone through and you've looked through the information and you've updated it, which primarily you want to focus on these top sections right here, and even the contact information. Anything below that you really don't need to worry about, as you should really let us know at the HMIS help desk if something doesn't look right down below here. But what you're going to do is check off the box. You'll select the date of when you confirmed it. I'm going to go and say I confirmed it today, and then I'm going to say save. What it does now is it locks it in there, and then it'll pop back up a year later, if you have not completed it again. All right, so next thing we want to do is after you've looked through and you've confirmed those units, where you can actually dig a little bit deeper. Where you can look at the room detail if there's specific information you want to see. And for the most part, any caseworkers or case managers, or the case manager work group really only has read access to this information. It's when you go to the assistant agency manager work group or the agency manager work group is when you'll be able to maneuver and edit this information. Or viewing the beds, editing the beds. Like I said, the only thing you can actually do as a case manager is look at the bed usage history to see any past or current clients. So if there were past clients, it would be filtered. You'd see past clients in that unit as well. The next option is you have your housing residents, where this will actually list all of your housing residents within the program. So I'm wondering, let's see, if I go to, yeah, let's go to another facility. I go to housing residents. And what it does is, based off of the date, it'll either let you select by room who's in there, or if you go click on select, it'll show you all your housing residents. One thing that you could do is you could check clients out from this angle as well. However, I would recommend going through the actual client enrollment workflow and exiting the enrollment that way, because then that'll automatically check them out as well. This primarily checking out is, if you're dealing with any cleanup of data and so on and so forth, you have to go back and enter the information. But essentially, if the stay is attached to an enrollment, it'll automatically check them in and check them out. Same thing for any previous residents. You can actually take the date back if you wanted to, or adjust it. Let's say you wanted to just see clients that were up until that point, you can do that. Or let's say 2014. Too far. 2015. So you can just look at the clients in that particular time frame. All right. Again, this client check-in, household check-in, really is just for when you're doing backfilling of data or updating of the records, because again, everything's done through the enrollment. But it's similar, same screen that you saw before when I showed you, where you have the facility, the check-in, check-out, the room that you could select, the bed associated to that room, the dollar amount per client. And this is a little bit different, where you could actually where you have to click on the magnifying glass, type in the client's name. We'll say select the client, and then like I said, if there was an enrollment attached, or if you have not done an enrollment, it'll show up like this. So you'll want to make sure that the enrollment is created. So essentially, you can't really use this functionality without the enrollment being created. But I wanted to show you guys that so you understood what you would see and so on and so forth. Same thing, so the client check-in would be for a single client, household check-in would be for a check-in of the household. And again, with the check-in of the household, you want to make sure that you search by the head of household and go from there. So like, let's say I wanted to use Mr. Manziel here again. I could actually check him in. Again, you'll have your alerts come up. I'm just showing you this as an example. You could put in the date as well as the selecting of the room, and then any other household members that come up with him. But because there's no household members selected or added to his enrollment, no other household members are going to come up here. All right. So that pretty much covers the case manager's view of how to kind of look at the rooms, the beds, how to move through the housing residents, previous residents, and so on and so forth. This next cool one right here gives you the ability to manage any properties or development projects within your organization. We're actually working on something right now. Won't say too much about it, but it's going to have some type of integration with another platform that'll allow you to kind of look at other properties. But this right here, maybe will appear with other properties actually in the system attached to specific counties or cities. But this right here gives you the ability to add specific properties that you're working with, or landlords that you're working with. So you could say, I don't know, 123 Spruce Street. Which you probably should put. We'll say we'll put the property or landlord's name, okay? So we'll do 123 Spruce Street. I always like to put the zip code in first, so it gives me the state, city and state. And then you can put in as much information as possible on that. You can contact information. Then you get the landlord, property manager, or provider association. You can either select it from the list if it's already there, or you can add a new landlord. Again, we'll do private. I'll put in the information that's required. Try to put as much information about the landlord as possible, because this right here will kind of help you build what's, if you don't already have one, what's called a landlord database that you could store within here. You have the option to always come back and review the information as well to make sure the information was correct, and add any other properties that they might have. You can put in a specific associated provider. So basically what you see here is I have a lot of providers here, but you'll only have what is associated to your organization. All right. Then you can even do like occupancy type, whether it's general, homeless, 55 or older, 62 or older, physically disabled, things like that. That they were looking for, and then whatever the makeup of the unit is. So you could say a 1-bedroom, let's see, 10 1-bedrooms, 5 2-bedrooms, 1 3-bedroom. Go ahead and save that in there. And it should have saved. But again, you can go in, you can look at the information to view it, to see what properties are where, what, and so on and so forth. You can even mark up fair market rents and so on and so forth to see where that lies for that community. All right. Also, as a case manager, you can pull your daily usage reports, like your daily check-in report, your daily occupancy, and as well as voucher status reports if you're dealing with vouchers and wrapper housing and so on and so forth. So, all right. As well as your inventory history report, where you can look at your annual bed utilization percentage, facility utilization report, and your housing inventory. Again, reports are pulled similar to what we did last week. But I'll run one just to show you. Or it'll break. You can select multiple agencies or facilities, and it'll kind of give you a breakout of your utilization rates. You'll probably see the whole on the last Wednesday of October, January, in that quarterly fashion. You've seen that before in APRs or the AHAR and so on and so forth. Similar concepts. All right. Now the same thing applies for, so that's an actual physical facility. So that would be your permanent supportive housing, your transitional housing, your emergency shelter programs. When it comes to voucher-based programs, it's a little slightly different, but not really different at all. Just quickly show you what that looks like. Whereas, again, I selected the facility over my wrapper housing. The words are a little bit different as a case manager. It's just voucher management. And what you're going to see is you have your facility dashboard, your active vouchers for review, as well as any closed vouchers. And these work similar with the same type of workflow where you're entering the client into the system. And it'll ask you, would you like to add them to a voucher or check them in? The only difference is you can really you don't have to, you can actually, if you don't have a certain number of vouchers and you need to add another client, you can actually create a voucher on the fly. So let's use Mr. Manziel as an example. You know what? Let's use I'm going to run over to the client workspace one more time and verify. I'll do a check-in of Mr. Manziel real fast just to kind of give you an example. I'll add him. You know what? I'll add one family member with him. Save and continue. So this one I'm going to say, where is it at? just say him and one child. Up. All right. Go ahead and run through this real fast. Again, it might be also important to look at this where it asks you within this assessment, is the client or household currently residing in the household? If you're working with the client and they do not have a lease and they haven't physically moved into the program, then you would select no, and you would follow the other directions from there. But if they actually have a lease in place and they've moved in, then you'll put yes, and you'll select the date of when they moved in. Where are we at? Just say. Again, if you're using the default assessment, make sure you select the types and they're checked off before you move on and save it to the next screen. No, yeah, save. Skip the rest of these. Yes, we do want to check them into facility. And this time, we'll select the enrollment. Again, you can look at the vouchers to see what you have. Obviously, we already have vouchers established in there, but there's nothing that's open. So we have the date, and what we'll do this time, because as you see, it'll tell you 0 current occupant. We'll create one on the fly. We'll say let's say 2. Monthly amount, we'll say $50. You can adjust the address to how you want it. I'll leave that the same. Fair market run area, we can actually search for the area. We could say select whatever area where they're at with at least one adult, one child. And really, this is the most important one, is the household type. You could select these if you wanted to, if it applied. But the really main one is the household type, and then anything that has a red asterisk. We'll save it. Now you see the voucher is there. We'll select that. It'll bring the information over. As you see, their information is down here below, and we'll save the voucher. We'll click Finish. We'll go back over to the housing workspace. What I'll do is I'll do the facility, and then we'll go back to active vouchers. And as you see now, it lists all your vouchers as well as the Manziel household with the number of occupants, as well as the monthly cost. So right now we're spending about a little over $4,000 in monthly cost in our voucher program, and then the total amount of vouchers that we've spent up to this point is $95,000, as you see, a little over 95. So it shows you this, and you can download these as an Excel, or you can do a voucher report, which will show you the same information. Now, you might want to think about doing a specific time if you know that a voucher like rapid housing can't exceed 24 months of assistance, or whatever the grant calls for. You might want to put the end date in there so that you know that you're not going to go over in terms of your reporting for that voucher. And the vouchers can be used for rapid housing. They could be used for homelessness prevention. They could be used for Section 8. They could be used for public housing. Whatever has a voucher, you can actually use this. And the same thing, you have your closed vouchers, your check-in, and then your property and development, where you can manage all your properties there as well. And again, similar reports. Here's your voucher status report. Go ahead and select it. We'll do a summary format and run the report. Where it'll give you an overview of their total number of vouchers, how many are available versus how many are closed versus what's occupied, and so on and so forth. I'm giving you the amounts and so on and so forth. All right. I'm going to pause for right now before we go into the agency manager functions to see if we have any questions. Brian, do we have any questions that we haven't already answered?
No, there doesn't seem to be any.
Okay. All right. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch over to my agency manager work group, because now I'm overseeing that kind of information, and I realized as a caseworker something was off and something needed to be updated. So again, we went through the voucher management. The one difference that you'll see now is you'll have this housing voucher setup option. And again, all these, I'll just go right over here to this, to the website again. So the usage guide is primarily what you'll use to kind of maintain it, or this recording. But there's also the housing inventory setup quick reference guide and a more in-depth setup guide. But you can refer to those guides when the recording's not available or you don't have enough time to review the recording. So We'll go to housing voucher setup. What I'm actually going to do, let's go back and switch to the permanent supportive housing for a second. All right, now we'll go to housing setup. And what we'll do this time is we will, one, you can look at your facility profile here and confirm your information all under the setup if you're an agency manager. Or you can come here to your room bed configuration. Now you can go to the housing designer and load that. It's a nice kind of concept and layout of how they do it, but it's a bit confusing because of the of where it takes you and gives you a nice pretty graphic and so on and so forth. But I would recommend using this room bed configuration because it's going to be an easier way to setting up the beds. So again, as you see, there's the room, the unit, and the housing type that you want to function. If you realize that, hey, Unit 3 actually is for households without children, 2 adults. You can switch that over that way, and you could say it's for veterans, and you would ultimately save it and go from there. If you realize that you have more than one room, like you have a 4th room, you can add a 4th room, or you can click add a room that way as well. We'll add 2 new rooms. We'll name it. We'll say there we go. Unit 5. If we wanted to, we could say this. We'll click save, and it'll save those rooms in there. Now, in order to add the beds, we can actually click on the view or edit beds option. And similar, this time you would just say bed 1. These were singles, so we'll just say bed 1. If you wanted to, you can get fancy and you could say, I don't know, it's a double bed. You could do the icon and whatnot. You don't have to. But if you wanted to actually show exactly what the bed type was in there, so you could say single bed, single icon, or you can also say a cot or a crib. I would say a crib would be like a pack and play for those that are family shelters, and you can adjust those in that regards. We'd save that in there. And as you see now, it has 2 beds available, 0 occupied. Same thing. View and edit. We'll say 1, bed 1. If we wanted to adjust it, we can go to bed room 2, and we could say, you know what? There's only 3 beds in here. We can delete it. Save and close, and go from there. If you want to get real specific, you probably wonder why I keep skipping over room detail. But essentially, room detail, you can edit from outside of this, but you could say, you could say room number, or say first floor, 101A. You can add a specific address if you wanted, and so on and so forth, or add specific designation. It's literally the exact same thing that you're going to see on here. But again, if you put something long, it might not show up. So what we'll do is we'll add that back as 1 and save it, let it adjust itself again. And go from there. Again, you don't have to really mess with the fair market rent. I know you probably saw this here, fair market rent areas. You don't have to mess with that because we've updated that to the most recent 2018 fair market rents. And what we'll do is try to do that on a yearly basis when the fair market rents come out. We'll put the most recent ones up there so that you guys have that information available to you. Let's see. Another thing too is if you wanted to, I know I showed you, for example, I was in bed 2, I removed the bed. I just want to show you this real fast. If I go to bed 1 where I put Mr. Manziel, you'll notice that any bed that's occupied, you cannot edit or move them to a different unit. You actually have to remove the client from the bed in order to move them out. And as you see, it's grayed out here to where you can't. If you wanted to say, well, this bed is actually, or I got a better example. You could say that pack and play, right? Let's say they didn't need that pack and play and it ended up being a single unit. We could say, well, let's move that pack and play to unit 2 or to unit 5 where that other bed was. Click save. And now you'll see that room 4 only has 1, now room 5 has 2. The only time you'll be able to do that is if the bed is open. All right, I think that pretty much wraps it up with what we've gone through in terms of how to adjust the bed or the housing management setup. Let's quickly go over the voucher setup as well. Similar, you can go to housing, voucher setup configuration, same process. This is a little bit different, where you can actually adjust the name of the voucher, occupants, and the amounts. So like if the lease changes or something for that specific voucher, you can put those in there. And save. And you can filter by your active vouchers or your closed vouchers to help maintain those and so on and so forth. You can either set up your vouchers at the beginning of the grant, which I would recommend using. If you have a certain number of vouchers that you applied for, whether it's through ESG or CFC, and you say you have a target number of this is what you're going to serve, I would go ahead and put those in there, and then you can always adjust that going down the road to ensure that the information is correct moving forward. Other than that, do we have any questions?
I don't see anything else.
Okay. Would anybody on the line like us to cover anything else specific related to the housing management, voucher management. If there's anybody that's not set up yet correctly, or has a program that's not in HMIS and they want to use HMIS to help drive some of this information, feel free to reach out to the help desk. Again, I'll reference the HMIS website, as well as our most recent all of our most recent guidance and documentation is going to be on the home workspace under your PA HMIS account, and then system documents. And then if you go to system feature guides, you can pull up the specific guides that you're looking for. Which is right here. It downloads as a PDF, opens right up, and then it gives you a specific step-by-step process of how things are maintained and managed, and so on and so forth. Other than that, if you have any other questions after the fact, feel free to reach out to us. We'll stick out here for another 8 minutes or so if questions come in. Other than that, have a great rest of your week, and thank you for attending today.